So welcome back. We're going to continue this conversation on ESG. So I want to actually set up the conversation with Paul. He serves as the government affairs consultant for the Home Builders Association of Greater Chicago, where he covers a variety of housing issues. He's been supporting the industry in a lot of big ways, and including affordability, inclusionary zoning, building codes. Recently, a focus on how climate change laws and regulations were starting to impact or have impacted residential real estate. Now, this is from single family to multifamily, even the high-rise stuff. He's a member of the City of Chicago Building Decarbonization Working Group, which is developing recommendations and policies to reduce the carbon emissions in the built environment. These are complex things that he's working on, and he's also the founder of EA Americas LLC. It's a consulting firm on climate and ESG issues for real estate. Paul's had a 40-year historic, he's just had a public view in all of these things that he does in the world of real estate, and this collision now with ESG strategies. So he's a public affairs in Chicago and the state of Illinois. So welcome in, Paul. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So you've picked up on our last conversation. This is continuing from there, but I would just love for you to just open up and tell us a little bit about where to even begin to think about this strategy for real estate operators.
Well, ESG goes, from my perspective, even deeper than your previous speaker, but maybe I get into the weeds. I'm sorry, I'm a lobbyist, so I get into see where the details are, because the fine print that matters most in some of the legislation. But we have a situation where investors, rating agencies, even corporations are all starting to demand ESG requirements. And they're coming at us from a lot of different directions. And last night, for example, I was speaking to a real estate professional with Salesforce. And basically, she said that if you want to do business with Salesforce, you better have your environmental product disclosure, which is you need to know what your carbon footprint is for your product. It doesn't matter what it is. You better know what it is. You can't do business with Salesforce. And so you have that kind of private sector push. At the same time, what's going on at, whether it be Chicago or Denver, New York, other cities, they're looking to reduce or have real estate reduce their carbon footprint. And we're seeing it at the national level too. And this is one of the reasons why I'm following the national, is because those regulations always come down. They start at the top, they come down local, and it's important to watch what's going on. But the Biden administration has a presidential order out saying that to all the federal agencies, get your climate house in order, so to speak. Get ready to report, your system, what's going to be going on. And a couple groups that have taken this to heart are like the SEC and the Department of Treasury. And the SEC is basically saying, if you're a public corporation, public REIT, or even private REITs, they have to report to the SEC. We want you to prove your sustainability claims. You can't just say we're sustainable. You have to be able to prove it. And what's happening is they're starting to focus on what is a common international standard for reporting your carbon footprint, how to measure it, monitor it, manage it, and mitigate it. And that is the ISO 14000. And we've got this alphabet soup of whatever you want to call it, platforms, or we got GRESB, we got LEED, we got all these different groups are all saying something different. And I'm at a standpoint where if locally I have to report on something, I'd like to do it consistent with other programs. As my building engineers like to say, just tell me what I'm supposed to do and I'll do it. You know what I mean? And it's
do we know though right now?
What's that?
Do we know right now what that is?
Well, it's evolving. And so we know that the SEC is adding to staff. We know the SEC has put out a risk guidance, risk alert saying to corporations, you better be ready to prove your sustainability, or you may be subject to fraud allegations. They've even published a example letter, a sample letter, I should say, of enforcement if you cannot prove your sustainability claims. And so what I'm learning as I've gone through this, and like your previous guest, it's taken 3 years. I mean, I've been following this for 3 years and it's still evolving. It's still hard to understand. But what I'm learning is that the government, federal government, is gearing up to require reporting in a certain standard. And if you look at their data, their literature, ISO 14000 is that international standard they're adopting. And so it's coming one way or another. If your ESG plans around environment aren't based on an ISO 14000, you may get questions from federal regulators. And again, this is at the highest levels of your reporting. But I also want to say at the banking levels, they're doing the same thing. Citibank recently said that it's going to start asking some of its major customers to prove their sustainability claims. And again, you've got S&P, you've got Moody's. I'm trying to think of all the rating agencies.
And that's out of compliance.
This is a compliance. I'm talking about compliance. It's one thing to be voluntarily doing it,
right,
but it's getting to a point of compliance. And the lawyers like to use a term, legal peril, that if you're not doing it right, you may have legal peril. Now, this is going to evolve. We're early on it. This could be a year or 2 or 3 to develop, but it's coming. And part of what I have to do is look forward, look as far as I can over the horizon to see what's coming so I can prepare at a local level.
And is this what you're helping people work through, identifying, assessing, and working through these things?
Yeah, so I work with a technology company that is well-versed in ISO 14000. And so they do the technical side of it, of gathering the information, developing the reports, filing them in the proper way, so that when the time comes, when you have a report, and by the way, you report to the CNN, which is the Climate Neutral Network at the UNFCCC, which is United Nations Framework on climate conference change. I can't remember what it all stands for, but it's a UN agency and it's public. Your documents that you file there are public and anybody can look at them. But the idea here is if you're going to report, follow an international standard.
Wow. What are some of the things we should be considering now, knowing all of that? You can't unlearn that part of it.
Right. Well, just like GRESB. GRESB is great guidance. It's a good first step. The greenhouse gas protocol, Energy Star Portfolio Manager, all of these resources and tools are very good first steps, but they're not complete steps. And I think when you look at your sustainability department, you got to look beyond just marketing. Just the fact that you've got a plaque on the door that says we're green isn't enough, that you're going to have to prove it. And so from my standpoint, I'm trying to say here in Chicago, as we're moving forward on a decarbonization plan, whatever policies we adopt here nationally or locally, they got to align with the national policies. They need to be in alignment so that we're not, I don't want to have 5 or 6 different reports that people have to file. So if we can follow the portfolio manager for benchmarking, as long as that can fit into ISO 14000, those are things that are important to me as I look at these evolving policies.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier, it's just good business to do some of these things, but you're talking about even like working with like a company like Salesforce, that these things are now requirement based on how maybe they've structured their decisions of where they get their capital and all the compliance inside even a software like that. And take me through the conversations you're having through developers, operators, owners, Are they seeing this making financial sense as well? And I'm just getting to the impact to this from values and.
Well, it depends, frankly. I mean, everybody is on a different part of the continuum scale on here of being at the very beginning, and some are already know where they're going to be at the end. And so it's still a lot of education. And I'm getting prepared here in Chicago to put on some education programs for my members on these issues. Because as I said, it's going to take some time. These are not regulations now, but they're coming. But here in Chicago, they're going to be very aggressive in 2022 to adopt decarbonization policies for multifamily, offices, you name it. And these requirements are going to want us to cut our carbon footprint significantly. They're claiming that we are 70% of the carbon emissions in Chicago. You know, most people say we're closer to 40%. They're saying 70. So they're going to be very aggressive at coming at us with ideas on how to reduce carbon. So it's important for me in these conversations that I know what the programs and policies are out there, because we have a lot of people who have great ambition, great big ideas, but they have no practical knowledge. And so the biggest problem for me is gaining that practical knowledge so that as I'm there at the table working on these programs, I have a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work.
And who would those, is this every asset class? Who does it apply
absolutely.
to?
Yeah, I mean, the 70% they talk about is industrial, retail, commercial office, multifamily, single family, you name it. It's all, every built piece of real estate is concluded in this asset class that they're talking about decarbonizing, which means they want to electrify everything.
And does it go beyond buildings?
I'm sorry?
Does it go beyond buildings? What's really all involved?
Well, they may ban gas hookups. We may not be able to, in new buildings, have gas hookups, even though there's evolving renewable natural gas or hydrogen gas, lower carbon gases that could be there. But that's one of the things we have to deal with. We have a benchmarking ordinance in Chicago, and they use the portfolio manager for it. They may start to say, well, if you're not performing well enough, we're going to come in and require you to do more for energy efficiency. And so it's from top to bottom, new as well as existing. And the biggest problem is going to be existing real estate. As the previous speaker said, some buildings have old technology to use, old windows, old heat plants. I mean, you name it. Going to go back and retrofit those buildings is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, so I'm just going back to a note here on the you mentioned the credit agencies and I think it was Fitch or Moody. I can't remember what we were talking about, but basically
S&P and Moody's,
yeah, right,
the two
right.
that I know about. I think Fitch has developed a climate score too. I just don't know. I know S&P and Moody's has.
Basically, yeah, I don't know either. Will the lead and sort of the lead and all those other programs that have come before us, what's the education we need to do about what's different about that and where we go from here, I guess?
Well, I'm a little bit of a lobbyist, so sometimes that can be a little blunt. LEED is more of a marketing program rather than a compliance program. I mean, you have to comply with a number of things that are in LEED, but LEED itself, it doesn't necessarily perform in a decarbonization way that you really need to do for compliance. And so, well, it's good guidance, it's a good marketing tool, but if you're looking at compliance with the government, it may not be the best one. But again, it's a guidance. And so you need to go beyond LEED. You need to go beyond, and there's a whole bunch of them. I don't want to single out LEED. We just mentioned LEED, but there's a lot of different green building standards out there. And I don't know of a single one that is totally compliant with ISO 14000.
Well, what kind of legal problems does that bring up, I think, and how can investors and operators even think about preparing for that?
Well,
hiring you or
one of the things we've been one of one of the things we're learning is that sustainability is now coming under compliance in the legal office because they're starting to say, okay, if the SEC is coming to get involved in this, if the Treasury Department is getting involved, if FINRA and all the other different federal agencies that govern how we operate a corporation or get our money, if they're going to get involved, the lawyers are getting involved. And so that's where that legal peril comes in. And it's not here yet, but at some point in the future, the SEC is going to grab somebody by the neck and say, we don't believe your sustainability claims. We think it's greenwashing. And if they think it's greenwashing, then you may be subject to some enforcement action. It may be, well, you got to clean something up, but if it could go worse, it could be a lot worse. I'm hoping it won't. I'm just fearful.
You want to be the example.
Well,
no, I mean, you don't want to be the legal example is what I mean.
Yeah. So again, I got to be careful. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Yeah, nor am I.
Yes. So one
how
of the
does
things
this impact, how does
lawyers,
this impact local communities and like where is it all in? Is it national you mentioned or?
this is national now, but it's coming down our way. It may take a year or 2 or 3 before it hits Chicago, but if we're required to set up a reporting framework under a decarbonization strategy for the city of Chicago, are we going to follow a specially made one, or are we going to follow a national example? Are we going to, the key here is that we've got national companies with national ownership. We have international funds investing in Chicago, and they're going to want some consistency. And I think that consistency and that very clear disclosure is going to impact local decisions. But for me, on the local level, it's now going to impact decisions you make in the buildings. Excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's great. So how do you approach the implementation of all of this? I mean, you mentioned earlier a technology, a platform of such. What should we be thinking about in terms of the tools and the technology that's available to implement and even measure all of this?
Well, it's changing. It's changing so fast. In Illinois, we're dealing with the requirement for a hookup for electric vehicles. We're supposed to make every garage or parking lot EV capable, or where if you don't have a charger, you at least have to be wired for a charger. Well, there's a whole lot of evolving technology to manage your electrical load to provide charging facilities. So it comes down to, why do we need to have every parking lot or parking space electrified for an EV charger? If we only have a penetration of maybe 2 or even 5% of electric vehicles in the next 3 to 5 years, why are we asking for 100% compliance? I mean, that's a key thing. We need to know where technology is going, and if technology is evolving. Every company, not every company, but most companies have a different type of charger for their car. So why should we legislate a specific technology when there are different technologies that are out there? So how do we find a way to regulate or legislate a technology that is inclusive of different electric vehicles in the future? And how do we legislate a technology or language that is allows technology to change? I mean, yes. Our constant example is a cell phone. I mean, our cell phones have changed so much from the brick phone that I had years ago to where they are now that who could have legislated that, prepared for it?
Yeah, it's changed so fast.
So, yes. And the people who, I mean, one of the things too is that just about every company I've talked to has the mission to be greener. They have a mission to be more, to reduce their carbon footprint. They truly want to adopt policies that work, but that's the key thing. Do they work? Are they practical? And that's what I've got to do in terms of my job, is make sure that the local legislation, the state legislation has language that doesn't lock us into impractical solutions to the problems.
Now, how do you go about doing that? Meetings? Uh, I mean, I'm
It
sure
is,
you're educating quite a bit, and hopefully
it,
it's not wearing you out, but
yeah. Well, sometimes you got to hold your tongue that when you're in the meetings, when you're with the advocates, and you have to slowly show them that an idea they have may be a great idea, but where's the practical reality of it? How does it truly impact how a building is built? How is it operated? How is it maintained? All these things come into play, and in and I like to get people at the table with me who are operators of buildings. Like I said, building engineers and others who know what works in their building. And I'll just give you a quick example. I mean, looking at trying to reduce the carbon footprint, just simply switching to a renewable energy source, be it wind or solar or whatever it may be, can substantially reduce your carbon footprint. I mean, there's little things like that that once we become aware of them and we educate not only our asset class, our managers and owners, but the broader public, that yeah, we can help each other. The broader public wants to get more renewable energy sources out there. So we as an industry, if we want to reduce our footprint, look to renewable energy as a possible source, we solve two problems. We're reducing our own carbon footprint, and we're helping the development of renewable power. And so this is where I say, embrace the goal, but be very careful of how it's implemented. And that's my job, is to look at the implementation.
yeah, I think I would love to know what would be the next steps those owners that you want to spend time with should do. And then I'd love to hear your final thoughts. I know we're coming up on the end of our time together, but I'd love to know, what would those operators or owners, what would be their next first steps? And then I'd love to hear your final thoughts.
Well, take a look at your sustainability plans. Make sure you can measure them. Make sure you can monitor them. Make sure you can manage them and mitigate. What are you doing to actually reduce your carbon footprint, your energy efficiency? Call it what you may, but at the day, when the day is done, you're going to lower your carbon footprint, your energy usage on your property. And if they're not doing it in a way that's clearly transparent, measurable, and can be quantified in a spreadsheet, they're probably not headed in the right direction.
What does it cost to assess these things first?
It can be, depends upon your portfolio. It can be a few $1,000s to tens of thousands of dollars. There are ways to some of the upfront costs to get your systems put together to gather the right information may be high, but once you have the system in place, gathering the information on an annual basis is very easy. So it's really an upfront cost that takes some time to implement.
Is that what you're helping people with too, or is that?
So yeah, so I'm working with another company, Net Zero Analysis, here in Chicago, and they are the engineers. They are the people who can do that analysis, who can do that measurement, who can gather the information in the proper way. They are the experts. I'm going to stay out of that side of it. My job is to make sure to get people on the right path.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'll let you, I know you've got a busy schedule. I'd love to know if you have any final thoughts, maybe something you can leave our viewers with, and then we'll be tracking, I think, this conversation more closely and hopefully spending more time with you.
Well, my last thought is the National Association of Home Builders adopted a resolution at the IBS show, the International Building Show, that basically said if the government's going to come at us with net zero energy policies, there also ought to be a net zero cost. So part of our job as we look back is to avoid some of these high costs. We need to be looking to government to say, all right, where's the trade-off? I mean, I know we got the goal. I know we have the where we want to be, but it's going to cost money. And if it's going to cost money, where's the trade-off? Is it cheaper capital? Is it lower regulation? There's a lot of things that can be done, because one of the biggest questions will be equity. And the equity, I'm looking at older buildings that are occupied by low to moderate income folks, that they may not be able to afford these upgrades that the government wants us to do. And if they can't afford it, how do we do it? So it's a tough question.
That could impact values pretty strongly, and I love those questions. Paul, it's been great sharing the time. You've showed up. Yeah, you've showed up for our audience really nicely here, so I'm sure they'll have questions. Where can they get in touch with you?
Well, there's a couple different ways. Through the Home Builders Association, Paul at hbagc.com, or my own company, Paul at eaamllc.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, again, thank you again for showing up in such a great way, providing great education on these ESG strategies. So appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next episode, I hope.
Yeah, I wish I was in Phoenix, though, instead of Chicago. But,
right.
It's snowing out there.
We'll have to come to you one way or the other.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Paul. All right, we'll see you.
Take care.
See you.